Brazilian brand Schaefer Yachts has become justly famous over the years for the creation of some really voluminous, cleverly designed, hard-working family cruisers. But more recently, it's also got involved in the creation of high-end Mediterranean-style day boats along the lines of the sorts of boat you'd expect to see from the likes of Fjord and Pardo. Well, we've already seen the launch of the Schaefer V33, and a very successful launch it was too. But here at the Düsseldorf Boat Show, they're following that up with the launch of this, the all-new Schaefer V44. As we make our way up the steps towards the back end of this boat, it's immediately clear that that day boating imperative is taken very, very seriously. An absolutely vast deck space. The beam on this boat accounts for about 31% of the overall length, so it's very beamy, and of course with the fold-down bulwarks on both sides, that expands significantly again. And we'll get to that in a moment, but first, let's pop to the very aft end, back to the transom, and take a look at this engine rig. Now on the show boat, we've got triple Mercury 400s. You can also have this boat with triple 600s if you like, which very much taps in to the American audience and their taste for speed. You can expect around about 52 knots with that, about 46 knots with this, but you can also have it with twin IPS 650s or even stern drives, a pair of 440s, so there's plenty of choice there. And as you can see, even with these triple engines in place, we've still got plenty of room for a pair of proper swim platforms, one on either side. And if I move to the port side and take a look here, it's pretty well organised. You've got to say, we've got a big old hatch here for a telescopic ladder. We've got some handy grabbing points there on that aft rail. We've got sunken cleats to avoid causing any trip hazards, and very nicely embossed with the Schefer logo too. And right next to that, just in the back end of that central furniture, we've got the transom shower. Really good spot to keep it, it's very practical. And actually, you'll see that all over this boat. Boats in this sector, you don't tend to expect them to be particularly practical from a seamanship perspective, but this boat absolutely is. And that's part and parcel of Schaefer's heritage, as I say, in proper, well-sorted family cruisers. Now let's step up onto this aft deck and take a look at the basic arrangement here, because it's relatively simple. As you'd expect, big walk-around decks, central furniture fore and aft. Pretty much single level decks as well. We only have a small step up to the foredeck there, just to generate a little extra volume down below. And as you'll see later on when we pop down there, it pays big dividends in terms of headroom. For now though, as I say, this central furniture involves a big aft sunbed with reversing backrests that leads directly on to a transverse dinette with a fold-out table, big enough, I would say, to seat at least 8 people. But of course, this forward bench, the backrest here, can be independently reversed as well. So it's very versatile in that regard, and it basically means that you can sit 8 people forward-facing aft of that transverse wet bar, and that's not even accounting for the 3 seats up there at the helm. So it really is very practical in that regard, just if you like to face forward underway, which most people do, and get a decent bit of shelter from this screen and this big hardtop. And you can, of course, supplement this hardtop with additional canvases just to cordon off these side sections and provide extra protection aft. And actually, talking of protection, there are neat little devices fixed to the side screens there, which we'll take a look at in a sec. As I say, Schefer really does think very hard about his designs, and it shows through on this new V44. Now, we don't have engines beneath this deck, of course, because this is the outboard model. So there's some big space under there for all sorts of things, mostly on this boat filled with tanks, because we have not one 510 litre tank, but 3. One beneath the deck here, another further forward again. And the reason for that is because they want to give it very, very generous fuel capacity, more than 1,500 litres for a range of around 200 miles at cruising speeds. But at the same time, they want to keep the weight low down and central so they can maintain a very dynamic driving experience. Before we even get beneath the deck though, we've already got some very decent storage spaces here. If I just reach my fingers into the little recess, it's a very simple job to lift that one-handed, and you get access to a really good regular shape, beautifully lined. You fit all sorts of baggage in there for extended weekends away. And if we close that up and head further forward, well, these drop-down terraces, again, we've got little hatches for additional storage. And as you'll notice, freedom of movement on this boat is absolutely superb. And part of the reason for that is the fact that that big old hardtop is supported by struts that come down directly on top of the gunnels. So none of that 13'8" beam is wasted. It's all available to you directly here in the cockpit, exactly where you want it. Now let's move forward to this transverse wet bar, because everything we see here is basically standard, and it's a pretty impressive unit in terms of scale and facilities. We have an electric barbecue there in the on the port side. In the center we've got an ice chest, and over on the starboard side, as you'd expect, we've got a sink. We've got an additional fridge down under that section, storage in a bin in the center, and an ice maker on the starboard side, which of course is vital for a proper day boat. We also have additional units on each end. A bin to the starboard side, and over on the port side, just a little bit of extra storage for life jackets or lines. Now you can of course spec this differently. If you want extra ice makers or extra refrigeration, that's not a problem. But either way, as I say, it's a pretty useful unit. And all the more so because, in spite of the fact that these triple helm seats butt up against that transverse wet bar, there's still plenty of fore and aft distance here. Often you'll see this pinched in. It becomes a bit mean, so there's not sufficient travel to actually give a big guy decent space at the helm, but there's plenty of space to play with here. That hardtop is a very substantial piece of equipment too, and it all begins at the forward end with this lovely one-piece screen. And these side screens with the wind deflectors that I talked about, just flinging the wind a little further wide to protect the occupants both here and at the forward of these two benches. So it makes lots of sense in that regard. And what I also like about this hardtop, aside from the fact that we have good old steel struts to give it proper rigidity and support, that actually operates pretty well as an additional grab handle as you're making your way fore and aft, is the fact that we got a sunroof that actually opens with decent urgency. So often on boats you'll see the thing operating so very slowly, you're almost bored, you almost give up before it does its work. But here, because we're using a winch rather than electric actuators, what you see is action. Look at that. Within about 2 seconds the job is done. I'll open that back up again actually, because as you can see on this particular boat, it doesn't actually let the light in, and that's very deliberate. You can have a glass sunroof if you like, but that's actually fiberglass, that entire section, just to shade people here at the helm. We also have some very attractive ambient LED strips built into this hardtop, plus speakers, and you do of course have the option of a sunshade further aft, or canvases that come directly down to the back end of this sunbed, just so you can cocoon this entire space off as a sheltered party platform when the weather turns. Now we head to the foredeck. But again, I've talked about the practicalities, and we have them again here. Little fold-down teak steps and additional steps on top of the gunnels, just to give you proper access in and out of the boat. Ahead of that, just up this step, we've got little rod holders built into those bulwarks to keep them out of harm's way. And as you move round towards the foredeck itself, well, this is very much a tapered boat. It's not very much a beam forward design at all, and you wouldn't expect it to be. It's far more elegant this way, and this is what you tend to get from these high-end premium med-style day boats. So what we have is a central island sunbed, which is pretty conventional, but it's certainly very lofty indeed, which says good things about the volume down below. And it's covered in windows, not just on the sides, but also, as you'll see at the front, we have good access point here for ventilation down below. There's another window, and if I lean the camera over the side, you'll see that we also have long hull windows to supplement those on this island sunbed. So there's every reason to expect very good things when we get down below. And given that this is a relatively simplistic part of the boat, will do exactly that right now. Back into the cockpit, round the corner, and straight down we'll go. And when we get down here, well, as I say, this is a day boat. You've got to keep reminding yourself of that. So what we don't have is a permanent double up in the V of the bow, because that would be deemed a bit of a waste of space. If you want to come down here when the weather turns and you want a bit of air conditioning or a bit of warmth or a bit of comfort, you don't want to come to bed. You want to sit at a lounge and enjoy yourself. And this is a great way to do it. And then when you want to convert your bed, if I shift these cushions, it's the simplest thing in the world. Simply flip over that section there, and there you have it, ready to go, as simple as you like. And of course, these are the windows I was talking about. The whole window's here, nice and long and panoramic. There's the forward window in that sunbed, the side windows as well, that hatch up above. Additional windows further aft as well. So this is about as bright and spacious feeling as you're ever going to make the bow of a boat of this style. And if we look at the headroom, certainly further aft at the entry point, it's absolutely huge. Really impressive, that. I like it a lot. And there's a lot more to talk about here as well. Because if I spin around and look at the port side, what we have as standard again is a galley. So you can really service yourself properly down here. And it's pretty well spec'd. We've got a good size of sink and a twin electric hob. We've also got a little bucket here, which is practical, though I'd almost prefer a little ice chest for your champagne, a microwave oven down below, and an additional fridge. Plus we've got access to our electric panel just here as well. And actually, while I'm talking about access to the things that matter, I need to just nip up top before I forget about it as well, because this is really very neat indeed. Up at the helm, we have these little thumb screws. So you don't need any additional tools. There's one on either side. Undo that and you can lift this entire fascia off the top of the dash to access all of the equipment, all of the wiring on the back of your dash equipment, which is brilliantly practical and also really very pleasing in terms of the aesthetic. No exposed screw heads. So back down to the galley, as I say, this is quite an impressive section of the boat. We do have runners up above, which enable you to use a privacy curtain just to shut yourself off when this is rigged as a bed. But as you'd expect, we also have a mid-cabin, and we'll take a look at that right now. Looking at the nature of that upper deck and the fact we don't have much in the way of deck variation, you would expect it to be quite low and quite tight in here. But actually, this is pretty good. Encompasses that full beam, and even the vertical elevation is perfectly serviceable. Not difficult at all to sit up in bed as a 6-footer. As you can see, this is currently rigged for a pair of beds, but with a simple infill, you can turn it into an all-over double, which measures 2 meters long by 2 meters wide. So it's really quite decadent. Lots more storage on both sides, more hull windows, plenty more natural light. And that, if you have 2 or 3 kids, maybe even 4, is a great place to tuck them away and draw the curtain while you finish off your evening further forward. As for the bathroom, that sits on the starboard side, directly behind the bulkhead that houses that drinks cabinet. And the moment you open the door, a couple of things immediately make themselves plain. Now the first of those, as you can see in this mirror, is the sheer scale of the access point. I mean, you could be 6'6", 6'7", and still walk straight into there without a problem, because on a lot of boats of this type, the door frame comes down quite low, so you find yourself having to stoop in and then straighten up once you're in the space itself. And the second thing that I like is the fact that in the shower, and of course we have a separate shower here, not only do we get a little seating area, we also get the shower lever recessed into its own kind of trough, so you don't accidentally knock into it with your backside and burn yourself, which is something I've done on several occasions. As I say, very thoughtful design indeed. If I spin around and face forward, plenty of room for a separate toilet, a decent size of sink with storage, and another window with an opening port light just to give you a bit of extra ventilation. And of course, the fact that we have that excellent mechanism on top of the dash to access all the wiring means we don't need to put a hatch directly here in the shower in a wet zone, which is something a lot of builders do. This is a much better solution. That just leaves the helm station, and on a boat with the potential to do more than 50 knots, you need a helm that's pretty well serviced, and happily that's exactly what it is. Now, as I've mentioned, the fore and aft generosity in terms of scale is very good indeed, but there's plenty of width too. Good spaces between each of these seat pods, and it means you can sit 3 really big people up here at the helm without bumping elbows or stealing space from the man next to you. If I rotate and look at the dash itself, well, that is also a really good scale. Plenty of space on the upper tier for a pair of 12-inch plotters, plus your Fusion remote, a little charger, some air vents, and your zip wake controls, which come as standard. And that's presided over by a nice deep, about a fist deep actually, brow, just to keep the glare off. There's a compass directly in your eye line as the skipper, which is great. And this is nice quality. That's natural leather, beautifully stitched and all done in-house. It feels very premium indeed. On the lower tier though, this is arguably even more pleasing. Now, on a lot of boats, you'll get a whole rank of switchgear that gives you a kind of button blindness. You don't really know what you're aiming for because they're all mixed up. But here, they're quite intelligently arranged. We've got the lights over on the left-hand side, each button next to the button to which it relates. And the ones you need most often, your horn, your wiper, your screen spray, your anchor, your nav lights, they're all right here next to the wheel where they belong. And the wheel itself, of course, is adjustable. We've got the joystick here mounted on the left-hand side, and the throttles to the right, plus some really well-positioned grab rails for pulling yourself in and out of the skipper's position and heading fore and aft. It really is, in all regards, a very successful piece of design. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking a boat of this scale, of this quality, in this sector, is going to cost an awful lot of money, and arguably, you're exactly right about that. If we pop round to the back end and take a look at the specs, you'll see that this boat will cost you between 1.2 and 1.3 million euros, including VAT. Now, as I say, you could argue that that's a lot of money for a boat of this kind, but actually the opposite is true. That's very much the standard for this particular sector. And there's all sorts of ingenuity in terms of the design and all sorts of caliber in terms of the execution. So if you're in the market for a boat of this type, don't just do the lazy thing and default to the likes of Fjord or Pardo, because Schaefer's proven once again that it builds a very, very impressive boat. Now, whether you agree with that or not, please do leave a comment in the section below. We'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed the video, press like, and if you'd like to see more videos along these lines, then please do subscribe to the Motorboat and Yachting channel.